Loudspeaker Studios.
Good morning, Tromaville. Drop the needle because we're back with another exciting episode of Talkin' Troma with your host, me, Zach Bynes. On today's episode, I have a returning guest. You may remember him from my Death by Temptation episode, but his legacy goes back further than that. Today's guest is Chaz Kangas. If you live in Minnesota, you may have heard him on the public radio, The Current. If you're a hip-hop fan, you may remember Chaz as a fixture of the NYC freestyle scene. Chaz has several albums out, featuring such topics as movies, wrestling, struggles with depression, going on dates, a recipe for your next meal, the TV show The Critic, just to name a few. Chaz is a scholar in many things. One such topic is Troma films. I met Chaz on the old Troma message boards back in the mid-90s when the internet was the Wild West, and always admired his wealth of knowledge. We would talk music and Troma back and forth for many years, and then when I started this show, I would run thoughts past him and have him fact-check me on the subject at hand. Later, Chaz started working on a new album and sent producer Chris and I some of the beats he had. That same music you can hear at the intro and outro of this very show. About that time, we also asked him if he would like to come on as a producer, as he was already bringing a lot to the table. With such a gift of hip-hop and Troma, Chaz has unleashed to the world his newest album, The Troma Project, 50 years of real fan-toxic hip-hop from Four Finger Distro. Check the description for links on how to purchase his album. And that brings us to today's episode. Join us as we chat about Troma, the making of his new album, hip-hop, and even listen to a few tracks from him. Enjoy, everybody. Chris, roll the tape. Cut it over to the. Don't cut me off mid-sentence. The show where parents just don't understand because there's a nightmare on my street, and I'm here with hip-hop performer extraordinaire and producer Chaz Kangas. How are you doing, buddy?
I am fantastic. Greetings from Minneapolis. So happy to return here after, was it 4 years ago we did my last visit to Talkin' Tromaville?
Yeah, with Death by Temptation.
Yeah, which is going to be screening in Minneapolis for our Midnight Mayhem, the first Saturday of every month at 10 p.m. at the Main Cinema. We have that playing in February for both Black History Month and Valentine's Day. Can't wait to see the latest transfer of Death by Temptation on the big screen.
That'll be fun. I've never seen that movie in the theater, but now I kind of need to.
Road trip. Minnesota in February. Come on out.
I'll swing by the biggest ball of twine in Darwin, and then I'll come see Death by Temptation.
Nice. That's a travel hub. So just see that and then ride a replica Purple Prince motorcycle into uptown Minneapolis, go through Brainerd, see the Tool Master there, and then, pass in front of First Avenue. And the Main Cinema is actually just across from where one of the scenes from Jingle All the Way was shot.
Ooh.
So you get your full Minnesota fill.
And then while I'm there, I'll swing into the Electric Fetus record store to pick up the new Chaz Kangas album, The Troma Project.
30 years of real toxic hip-hop.
First off, I have to ask about the name The Troma Project. Is this a reference to the CD-ROM video game that Troma put out in the 2000s?
It is a shot-for-shot remake of every sound from that video game. We took the Gus Van Sant Psycho approach to that video game score. So it's a tribute album to that album. No, it's funny you mention that because I knew about the Troma Project video game's existence, and I had never seen a copy in person until at a local used CD store out here in Minneapolis. It was erroneously put into the CD section for music, and it was put into just randomly I'm sure, unless the person who works there has a great sense of humor, which they might, it was in one of the staff recommendations, just a CD-ROM video game when every CD around it is music. And so I purchased it and I have it, and then the Troma Project was what myself and the producers, J57 and Bald Half, we're just been calling it internally. And it stuck to it. And I kind of had forgotten and thought that the Troma project's name was Toxic Mayhem because on some of the promo material for it, it had just Toxic Mayhem written, forgetting that, oh no, that was just the promise of what was contained within the Troma project. But then I figured while we were making it, oh yeah, there's going to be no confusion in the marketplace. But unaware that the Troma project video game is now available on Steam and is very Googleable. So we attached on it, and then for a while it was the Troma Project, 50 years of real toxic hip-hop. And then Lloyd Kaufman, the president of Troma Studios and creator of the Toxic Avenger, his one note on the album was B-flat. No, his one note on the album was to change it to Fan Toxic. And I was like, yeah, it's actually a really good note because then you're not describing the toxic discourse, toxic masculinity, and people know that there's a fun level to it. So.
It's not just the toxic fandom on Reddit. So,
which we are courting.
I think it's pretty cool because back when we did Death by Temptation, the episode right after that, I also did with another hip hop artist, Extra Cool. And we all just kind of started talking around then about, I had a dream that you and Extra Cool did a song together. And I just threw that out there in the ether. I was like, you guys need to talk. You're both Troma fans.
And that song, Lloyd K, parentheses, a tribute to Lloyd Kaufman, the president of Troma Studios and creator of the Toxic Avenger, end parentheses, was really the event horizon for this album, the Troma Project, 50 Years of Real Toxic Hip Hop. And it's really, and I haven't told this to you yet, I was waiting for us to have this moment captured. It's really because of you, Zach, that this album exists.
Oh.
And that's why the very first track on the album is named Good Morning Tromaville as a tribute specifically to you and to this podcast, as that's how you open every episode of that. So thank you for allowing this dream come true and this thing to exist that could really only exist through the stars aligning and me reading that Twitter DM after coming back from my first COVID booster shot that, hey, I had this dream last night. So, dreams can mutate into hideously deformed dreams of superhuman size and strength and come true and become full Troma albums. So thank you for that, Zach.
Oh, that's really touching. I had no idea. I noticed the name on there, but that's really touching. I don't actually think I've ever talked on this show why I start every episode with Good Morning Tromaville. But back when I worked on Poultrygeist, when we would all show up to set, when the security was checking in with everybody, one of the security guys every single morning on the microphone would yell, "Good morning, Tromaville," and you'd hear that all around the chicken bunker. And we all knew we were getting ready for another day, in the Troma trenches. And that's always just kind of been my way of honoring my time in Buffalo, New York, in 100-degree weather heat with chicken zombies and a manic depressive filmmaker squirting blood and no showers. It's just, I always want to remember my roots on the show. So me honoring that and then you doing that as a tribute really means a lot. So I appreciate that.
Well, and for those who don't know, Good Morning Tromaville, the phrase is a reference to the classic Robin Williams film, 1 Hour Photo.
Of course.
Yeah.
I always was thinking it was more of a Death to Smoochie thing, but you're right.
Yeah. Because 1 Hour Photo, the scene where he's always going through the photos and saying "Good Morning Vietnam," it's wild. So that Robin, rest in peace.
So, toys.
License to wet.
Also, one thing that I like about the album, before we even really start talking about the tracks, is the cover art for the album. It's you holding the Troma logo, just dripping with slime. But the artist is also a nod to the Troma legacy.
Yeah, I really wanted something to be a full-on Troma album with how deep Troma runs in this and to stay authentic to it. Because for the core of the album, for those who may not know, is every sound you hear on the album in the production was put together solely from the samples within 50 years of Troma. When Lloyd heard the song that I did with Extra Cool, and he heard it, I think about several months later after we had put it out, he reached out to me, said how much he liked it, and he pitched the idea of Troma pressing and putting out a vinyl of that song and then some of my other songs and some of my artists who I really like songs I can get a hold of, and that Troma would press it and put it out, which is very generous and very cool. But I was thinking, while I had his ear and, as I got the DIY things and having this deep, fiery passion for Troma and also knowledge of how great the music in Troma is, from Curse of the Cannibal Confederates to Demented Death Farm Massacre to Redneck Zombies. There's so much great music within the Troma films themselves, and a lot of times the scores don't really get the attention. Even the Troma films that had official soundtracks like Decapitated and Death by Temptation and Terra Firma, it gets overlooked just how great the music is in a lot of them. And I think with Troma directors, who every Troma film is such a passion project, and they put what they love into these movies, as well as Troma movies take you to so many different parts around the world, and part of this postcard, this time capsule you're getting of these different parts of the world is you're getting the music in there. And knowing how deep and largely untouched the Troma soundscape has been in the realm of hip hop, specifically, like outside of Prince Paul and Necro and a handful of others who've gone into the sampling of it, it just seemed like there was this massive treasure trove. So I pitched to Lloyd the idea of doing a full-on Troma-themed album, sampling the Troma songs. He said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And that was about three and a half years ago. And I've been working since I've known J57, the producer, for 21 years. He used to work at this record store in New York that was called Fat Beats. That was essentially the mothership for all hip hop happening in New York City, not just for the music they'd carry, but for the flyers you'd go to see what's happening every show. The badge of honor would be if the discerning taste at Fat Beats would carry an album or music that you were putting out. And Jay was part of a group then, and we just really hit it off just as friends who loved hip hop and loved music. And then further, he gave me some beats that was on an album I put out in 2008 called Knee Jerk Reaction. And even like with us, like moving to different parts of the country, we all stayed in touch. He wanted to be part of a group called Brown Bag All Stars, and now he runs 5-7 Music. He also, every year since 2006, I put out a original Christmas song with the proceeds going to 100% of the proceeds. Every cent given to it goes to RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, and to Wigs for Kids. And since 2017, he has exclusively been the person to offer the production for that. And we call ourselves the Bad Boys of Christmas.
Quick side note, other than Troma movies, Christmas music is kind of my next really big, deep dive nerdy thing that I super get into, and I really love that you put out Christmas songs every year. It's one of my favorite things to look forward to all the time. So I love going back and revisit them, and even just throughout the year I'll listen to your Christmas stuff. I even have a playlist made private of every Christmas song of yours that I have. So
awesome, thank you. Yeah, and those are always fun to do, and that stemmed from, there was a band in Minnesota called Flip, who's also in Troma's Terra Firma. So there's a Troma connection right there. And they had the Flip fan club, and every Christmas they would put out either a cover of a Christmas classic or an original Christmas song. And then that's just something that I love. And then they took a hiatus in late 2003, early 2004. And so I didn't pick up the mantle. I guess I hung my own stocking by the chimney in 2006. And so, yeah, and I love doing, and Christmas is my second favorite genre of music behind hip hop. So it's always so much fun to do. And JVD7 loves doing that too. And so during the course of the year, I'll hunt for Christmas music, and I'll send him the Christmas songs, and he'll throw one together, and, or he'll throw together a few options, and then does the right one will hit, and then that'll be the one for that year. So
I do want to say, I remember on the Troma message boards back in the day, how I found out you were doing the Troma songs was take yourself all back to the early 2000s, and there was a certain viral video going around, and your song Two Girls One Christmas, I thought the title was so funny. And one of those, after I saw that you did that, I'm like, oh man, this is a tradition for me to listen to this song every year. So
it's funny because the first one I made the year before that was a Chaz Kangas Christmas, and that was one where I thought this might be the only one I ever do, but then it can live forever. Because I think artists, when you're putting out Christmas music, it's the type of thing where no matter who you are, at least 60% of your audience is not going to want to hear it. Because not just like people who don't celebrate Christmas, but people actively hate Christmas music, which I get. Not just saying they hate Christmas, but they hate. There's a study done about a decade ago about the things people hate most in music, and one was synthesizers, one was children singing, one was crass commercialism, and those three elements are in like so many Christmas songs. So I get why people hate it. So some people, they'll put out a Christmas thing and they'll be disappointed with the results. But on the flip side of that, you have a song that will always be fresh every year. It'll hit an immediate audience who wouldn't otherwise get, and you have essentially a perennial. You're just holiday songs in general. Like I think, the 90s both gave us the Mariah Carey Christmas song and the Adam Sandler Hanukkah song. And both of those are going to live forever. So yeah, just people, there's a certain, Christmas is going to happen every single year. So having something to just, push out, bring forward. And, it's fun to have something to look forward to make for a Christmas tradition every year. And I remember, I think J57 was the first person to have heard the completed Christmas song. I think I brought it to him the night before it had its radio premiere on Adam Bernard's The Adam B radio show. I remember playing it after Fat Beats had closed, and just always having a love for that. And then the next year, Two Girls One Christmas, that came together because my buddy Neil, who I went to NYU with, who was a fabulous musician, and I had this sample from the song that I really wanted to use. It had just kind of like a Christmassy vibe to it. And so he put that together and made it, and it's him playing the drums on an MPC for the drums on Two Girls One Christmas. And Two Girls One Cup had just come out, and which to this day I still haven't seen. But for the phenomenon of it, and just figuring, okay, if I'm putting out a second Christmas song, because I was going to call it another Chaz Kangas Christmas, but that would have kind of limited the appeal to those who A, know who I am, and B, know that I released a Christmas song the previous year. Which is an audience I love, but it's an audience who I think was going to check for what I'm doing already. And then calling it Two Girls, One Christmas was something that was going to just, if people are going to recognize the name alone and have my name attached to it. And so that holiday season, going around to different hip hop shows in New York and top indie rap artists in New York who at the time were the level above the underground, the battle circuits where I was making my name for myself. That was the time when they were pointing me from the stage being like, Chaz Kangas is here, Two Girls, One Christmas. And so that was kind of this is the way to put it in. So I think now the official title is Two Girls, One Christmas, parentheses, another Chaz Kangas Christmas. I think that title might have been too long for MySpace, but I think that's how it wound up being in circulation other places. But yeah, J57, I sent him the Toxic Tunes from Tromaville CD and the Poultrygeist soundtrack, and he sent me a handful of beats made from just putting sort of all those together, and I started right into those. And then J57's protege, Bold Halfwood, who has a passion for Troma as well, he started getting involved, and Lloyd started being happy with what we were putting together so far, and started talking with the potential of with other filmmakers Troma was working with about sharing some of the music with them. And then when I was talking with Lloyd about the project going further, and there were some songs from some Troma films I wasn't sure whether or not Troma had the music rights to do. And with one exception, sample that we later got cleared. The other ones, according to Lloyd said with the agreements that because of the nature of this project, it counts that we would be able to use them because the fact that it's a album promoting Troma, and these are films in the Troma library, that it counts as promotion for these films. Lloyd, who I trust his legal guidance to the ends of the earth, that opened up a whole new door for us. So that allowed me to just go further and being able to pull. And a lot of the things you hear in the production on this album, things you wouldn't expect to be samples from Troma movies because they've been manipulated past the point of recognition. You'll hear things that sound like a drum or a hi-hat or a bass thump. And that's Kabuki Man chopping something, or Toxie punching through something, or something exploding, just all manipulated. So every sound that you hear on the production on this comes from something in the Troma library. And some of it you may recognize immediately from watching the more known Troma films. Some of it may be things that pop out at you from like a movie you maybe haven't watched yet and you'll catch it later. Some may be a movie you watch and they'll subconsciously resonate with you and then you'll put it together later, with the idea of like a lot of Troma movies having that replay value that you can get more and more out of everything you get from it every time you listen to it, and having that level of replay value because these Troma movies are going to live forever, and having that same sort of passion with bringing to this album and doing the Troma name proud.
It was definitely something that took me by surprise when I heard it. I just didn't quite know what to expect. So in my head, I'm thinking we're going to hear, a sample of Nuke 'Em High and that type of sample. But like you said, it's a lot of like deep cuts and random things. There's also some more known samples in there, but it was really clever kind of how just across the board of samples that you got.
Thanks. Yeah. And it's the beauty of just the brilliance of J57 and Bald Halfwit is you can hear it on the first single, Girl School Screamers, which pulls from the Girl School Screamers trailer, but then also uses the very brief sound of the Kabuki Man interstitials score, like the scene transfer score, and having that pressed against, the different bass from a different Troma film and just the other elements within there. It winds up being a full celebration of it. And it would have been cool to do, and maybe there was sort of my mind, it would have been something where we're just taking one song at a time and one movie at a time. But I love how everything came out. It's just so cool. And to have this pastiche, because of someone who loves sampling in hip hop, and for a lot of reasons, it's harder than ever to sample now, and for good reason too. But to have something that has just this Public Enemy Bomb Squad, Beastie Boys, Dust Brothers, Ultramagnetic MCs style of sample into sample into sample, giving a lot of that unpredictability, a lot of that buried and layered replay value. So if you play the album in your car, you're going to hear some different things jump out than if you were to play it on Spotify or play it on vinyl. Just the level of the pastiche just lends itself to different things popping out.
On that note there, everybody out there is like, you guys have been talking an awful lot about this music album, but they probably want to hear a song. Do you have a tune that we could enjoy, and would you set that up for us?
I'd say the best place to start would be what's going to be the first song that people are going to hear from the project, the first single, Girl School Screamers, which we just mentioned a bit about the sample pastiche of that song coming together. And with this album, I wanted to capture a lot of the aura, the vibes, the spirit, the aroma du Troma. And part of that is knowing how, going back to the days of Squeeze Play and The Girl Who Returned, the Troma's always had strong women characters. And knowing how many great women in rap I know from all around the world, and knowing Troma's worldwide reach, I wanted to use this Troma platform I've been blessed with to highlight a lot of these artists from around the world. So I reached out to three of the best women in rap that I know. Anna Diorio, who longtime New York Underground fans may know by the former name she would use, Happy Accident, multi-time Freestyle Mondays rap battle champion. I got Minneapolis legend Desdemona on the track, and I got Rhyme Style Troop, who I've been a fan of through her work with J57. So to have them all on one track and have San Diego, the Twin Cities, and Arizona by way of New York all represented, all in the name of Troma, and then myself rapping at the end of it, it felt great to do. And it's also something where it didn't feel right being a guy by myself rapping what would be a song called Girl School Screamers, or having like other guys on there about it. And I figured the best way to do this would be have a all woman guest posse cut joining me, and the result is some real Troma magic.
7 beautiful co-eds are on a special project for their college. They're spending the weekend at the mansion of a recently deceased college benefactor. They expect a weekend of fun-filled partying, until evil forces take control and turn them into Girl School Screamers!
It's a requiem was it that I wreck it? But I ain't a reckless recluse with the penchant for obtuse abuse. My fuse is infused with the juice too. Back and forth like E40, I choose. Nope, yep, him switches like the West Coast. Always up in the ante with the best boast. Innovating like Kool Herc with the blessed toast. So influential, I get chose to guest host.
My life, you can learn from it. Passion for music like heat on the stove that's still burning. World still turning, little homies yearning to be the next up. Mid-time was the verdict. He passed the test on the street, now he earning. Cash rules everything around me, is my concerning. This game, rhyme style, troop, MDR. Winning battles in the streets was my claim to fame,
Take to the page, make my sacred rage. Center stage, wreck MCs with a single breath. Blessed and blazing the trail, you can't act like you ain't amazed. But I do this for my soul and God, not fame or praise. Breaking away from the mold of what a girl rapper ought to be. Body over mind, fetishized by the industry. What you think you want from me is never gonna limit me. All I need is 8 bars and I'ma kill the beat.
I don't cry when the glass is spilled, with a backbone stronger than Catholic guilt. Built my house with hands of stone. A rock and a hard place feels like home. I'm thriving in times of tension, analyzing the grind suspension. The apprehension gets averted. It's all preferred by the way you word it.
Dude, that song's awesome.
Thank you. I am very proud of that. And I love all the songs on this, but knowing the platform with Troma and capturing the spirit of Troma, when you were deciding what was going to be the first single, that one had to be it.
Another female voice on the album that was a surprise to see pop up in the notes and on there. Troma royalty, Debbie Rochon.
I love Debbie Rochon so much. That was a situation where Debbie is someone who I haven't met in person, but I've been a fan of hers for, a quarter century plus. In my early Troma fandom, when I was collecting, and still am, but then I started to collect Troma autographs and signed Tromabilia, I had found some are the original promo 8x10s that had been distributed when Terra Firma was released, one of which was of her. And back then, the 2000s era internet, when accessibility was a bit different than how it is in the social media age, but Debbie Rochon had an email address. So I reached out to say, hey, a long time fan of your work, love it. I have a 8x10 from Terra Firma that of you. If I sent this to you with a self-addressed stamped envelope, would you please sign it for me? And she said, sure. And she gave me what was her P.O. box at the time. And so I sent it with the self-addressed stamped envelope out there and promptly sent it back, and also sent me a signed Terra Firma poster as well, which is just showing just how sweet and awesome she is. So I've always had a whole lot of love for Debbie. And she also wrote me a really nice message in the letter that she wrote back in there, just thanking me. And she had, and also mentioning certain movies that she had just done that had just come out or to watch for. I think American Nightmares that she did had just come out on VHS, and she said that she was really proud of that one. So yeah, I've always had love for her. If a movie has Debbie Rochon in it, I watch it. I think a good rule of thumb that everyone should follow. So when it came time to doing the album and wanting to get Troma alumni on it, I was doing the song Clubhouse Alive 91. And given this is a celebration of 50 years of Troma, and hip hop also started 50 years ago as well, to have the 50th anniversary of hip hop and all the different styles of hip hop and trying to rap in different styles was a thread going throughout the project. And when Bald Halfwit and JV7 had cooked up what they did with Alive, the love theme from Troma's War, it had this definite hip house vibe, which was a style of hip hop that was big after Troma's War came out, but it had just a certain in the club style, which would later have the rap elements taken into stuff into CNC Music Factory. But before that, what I was sort of pulling heavily from is stuff like Jungle Brothers. And, there'd be even rappers like Big Daddy Kane, who'd be more traditional hip hop on there, but to have every rap album that came out at that time had to have a hip house track on it. NWA had a hip house track on one of their albums. So I wanted to do a hip house style rapping on it, taking one of those, almost stream of conscious sounding, these words pair together, in the club, it's more about the vibe and it's all about stacking the syllables as well. And that's also had another Troma alumni on there join me, John Brennan, who I told him the style to do it, and he knocked out what he did with his phenomenal verse. And so during my verse, as I'm peppering in references to different hip hop sounds at that time, because it's very reference heavy, as a lot of hip hop house as was at the time as well. And I have a line from an LL Cool J song called the Jinglin' Baby Still Jinglin' remix, where the chorus is, you jingling baby, go ahead baby, you jingling baby, go ahead baby. And I figured, it'd be great to get a woman's voice on this. And then I thought it'd be great to get a woman who is Troma royalty's voice on this. So I wrote a letter to Debbie Rashawn detailing, and she's someone who I've always been friendly with on social media. I follow her, and I think she followed me because of some of the rare Troma memorabilia that I've shared with her on it over the years. And I wrote a thing about how it meant so much to me, how at that point it was 20 years prior that she had sent that signed thing to me, and just how at that point I was a teenager and I was a young filmmaker and film obsessive, and how the time she gave and how encouraging she was, and just how that has meant a lot to me. And working on that, I explained the project to her, and if she would do it, she said, yeah, sure, I'll do it for you the next day that I'm in the studio. And a lot of times people say the next day, as you know, they don't mean that in like the literal sense. But no, the next day she recorded several different versions of her saying, you jingling baby, and sent those to me. And I remember getting it when I was in Fair Play Entertainment, which is the studios in Minneapolis, which Nerdy and DJ Hayes co-own and run. And DJ Hayes, who mixed the album, like, he didn't listen to the audio for saying Jingling Baby until after I'd recorded my verses, and we had mixed John's verse in, we had like mixed my verse in, and then it came time for this little thing to put in the Jingling Baby. And so we decide, because we're so hyper specific that we want to get the absolute best out of everything, we listen to every single version and variant of your Jingling Baby that she recorded on there. And they were all such, not gold, they were all platinum, they were all diamonds, they were all so awesome to hear as we're listening to it. And DJ Hayes turns to me and says, what if we just put this out, like, instead of the song? And I'm like, it's very, very good. But we narrowed it down to 3, and then we did several listens like of the song as a whole of those 3 versions, and then we decided on the one that was like the glass slipper that fit. And it's one of my highlights of the whole album, man. I think it's awesome that I can, not only that I'm putting out a Troma album, but I'm putting out a Troma hip hop record that has Debbie Rashawn on it. And in the Troma spirit too, of when you have the like large names who can just cameo and pop up for a few seconds and just have that very welcome presence, I think it's super cool that she did that. I think she is just such a wonderful sunbeam of a human being, and that she just, when we announced the album was finally gonna be great, because like we mixed and put that together like last summer, that song. And so this album, it took 3.5 years from starting it to it finally being released on Halloween this year. And the way that she was spreading the word about the album, like, sharing, not just like sharing the story, but writing a bit about how, like, how long like I'd been working on it, and it's just really cool, the encouragement and just making the world a better place, a warmer place, that Debbie Rashawn's just existence allows it to be.
Debbie is like genuinely one of like the nicest people in the entire world. Like I love her so much, and we've met in person a couple times, and each time it's just like seeing an old friend. Like, she is super sweet and super talented, and I don't have enough nice things to say about her because she's just that great.
Yeah, I absolutely adore her, and it's so cool that she did this, and it's so cool that she's spreading the word on it for this album that she appears on, just like she steals the show, so don't get me wrong, but that it's just she appears for a few seconds on it, and she's just amazing.
Speaking of like guest artists and stuff, did you ever think of having Lloyd hop on a track, like some sort of like Fat Boys inspired thing? He loves the Fat Boys, I seem to remember from his book.
For those who may not know, the Fat Boys are not very fondly thought of in Troma because of the Fat Boys. Because when they were acting in movies like Disorderlies, they allegedly threatened Troma with their upcoming movie Fat Boy Goes Nutsoid, which the title then Troma had to change to Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid. Which is also why I believe that Troma changed House, because House on Tombstone Hill, Troma was going to change to Dead Dudes or Dead Kids on the Block or Dead Dudes on the Block, because two of the actors in that movie look a lot like members of New Kids on the Block. But then after the whole fallout with the Fat Boys, Troma decided to change this being Dead Dudes in the House and saying it was a hip hop movie, even though it's got absolutely nothing to do with
Nothing.
hip hop. So, good movie though, but I digress. Yeah, I'm sure Lloyd would have been great. I think Lloyd, he's very incredibly musically inclined. Yeah, I just know that there's some things you got to save for the remix, things you got to save for the sequel. But thankfully, he does have a vocal presence due to the joys of sampling the Toxic Tunes from Tromaville CD. In the future, maybe we'll get Michael Hurst to beatbox for it as well.
Which incarnation of Michael Hurst?
Oh, well, this album has no AI on any of it, so it would have to be the currently still living Michael Hurst.
I was gonna say, I did notice the disclaimer on the back of the album that no AI was used. Can you talk a little bit about that? And like the state of hip hop right now, is that an issue where AI is being used in it?
I think it's a state across of all art. I know hip hop, at least on a very local level here, it's awful seeing hip hop shows with AI flyers. It's awful seeing AI art for singles and albums. For a culture that's always had such a distinct, ever-evolving visual style, from graffiti being one of the four elements of hip-hop, through you look at flyers for shows, through you look through the fashion and the ever-changing and the look, and there's so many great album covers, and there's so many great music videos, and so strong is the visual element representation of hip-hop that AI completely takes away the human element of making something new from something old, the sampling equivalent of how so much of hip hop exists. The DJs spinning different breakbeats into creating something new from something that exists that hip hop's always had. And AI just takes away that. And on top of just being terrible for the environment, it is creatively, morally dubious at best. The quality level is extremely low. And I think now in an era where you have interviews with artists, even outside of hip hop, like in music in general, in any form of the arts, in any form of civilization right now, trying to shove AI into everything. I'm proud of the fact that at no point in any regard, in any way, was AI a part of this project. I hope that more people stand up and refuse to use AI. Because when AI first started circulating, I had a resistance to it. And I wanted to give the chance because, anytime there's any major technological jump, there's always people who are resistant to it. And I didn't want to be someone like this, the point where it's come from my generation, my age, where the people who thought that taking a photograph would steal a soul, that sampling, wasn't real music, that using Serato wasn't really DJing. And I tried to educate myself and look into as many different quote unquote AI artists, and visiting one-on-one with as open mind as I could have of AI art tables at different art festivals like Art of World out here in Minneapolis. Art of World, they had the past couple of years, have had people there who claim to be AI artists, were then quickly shut down. When people are like, "Oh, I'm just making this cute, funny thing," like, no, there's a normalization of AI. There's not just, if you don't like it, don't use it. Like, okay, but like the quality of things are going down, and you hear the arguments of, "Oh, well, AI is already in everything you use anyway." It's like, oh, the things I use that don't work as good as they did 5 years ago because of the forced AI implementation. Like, search engines are terrible now. Well, you can't say that AI really made that better. It's as bad as predictive text was. AI has made it impossible now. I don't think anyone likes answering a phone and having to get things wrong when you have to speak to cycle of AI responses in order to get anywhere, or the AI help chatbots in any website. It's actively getting worse, and it's being forced into situations that is not helping anyone. And when you look at, there are some good things that AI can potentially be used for. Like if we were limiting AI to just the levels of medical research that would not be able to be undertaken by human beings, that would be one thing, and that'd be great. Even in the arts, if we're talking about AI being a last resort restoration for things of the silent era and earlier, that no existing other technology could be done to restore, then as a last resort, there could be some good from there. But you have people making entire commercials and music videos out of AI. You have, I mean, the thing with AI, even on an artistic level, how fast AI moves. Like, look at anything that someone, even if people made, like, you know, their funny meme or whatever from 6 months ago, and just how bad that AI looks then. I mean, the AI looks bad now, but just how unviewable it looks. Look at AI from a year ago. Look at it from 2 years ago. It just moves so fast. You're not creating anything artistically that's going to have any long-standing real substance. And I think the moment that made me really want to throw that on the album, I saw a documentary earlier this year that had 2 AI sequences in it, which the director defended as saying, oh, well, I used the AI because I wanted to create an uncanny valley feeling to it, and deliberately using the AI to make people uncomfortable. And it's like, well, no, hire an actual artist to do that then.
Yeah.
Because using AI for that, you're taking away from someone who could have done something a lot better instead of letting this horribly aging looking slop appear across a movie screen. So lines in the sand need to be taken, and having absolute no AI being involved at all in this project. I hope other people will do the same. I hope it goes the way of NFTs. I have just zero interest in any AI assisted art. I think even look at how bad a lot of 4K restorations have been with AI. Like specifically I Love Lucy. I don't know if you've seen those, the 4Ks, where because the quality control was so low that AI was making monster faces out of people whose faces just weren't in focus and like the background. Because the whole with art, with the human eye, with these cameras of focus, not everything needs to be in focus. And AI doesn't get that because AI is not human. People say, oh, it's just a tool. Well, yeah. And, you know, if you can, that hammer is a tool. I'm not going to use a hammer to brush my teeth. Like, I'm going to use a hammer on nails and that's it. And I think not even get into the ethical use of AI as a tool and what you're using that tool for. I just take major issue with it being forced into everything, and the fact that it's being forced into it at a time when it's clearly not ready, and it's making the quality of everything drop, and it's in general making everything worse. So I made this album as hopefully something that can let people know that we don't play with AI. We don't. We just don't.
And it's something I'd like to see, you know, kind of pop up on other movies or CDs and stuff like that, you know, like that disclaimer right after the, you know, the Humane Society disclaimer could have like a computer, you know, hugging itself saying no computers were exploited.
Yeah. And now like people are using AI for things they shouldn't need to be making AI for. Like, why are you using AI to make your grocery list? Why are you using AI to write a bedtime story for your child? Like, it wasn't intended for this. And ultimately, AI is, do people just not get how bad it is for the environment? The AI machinery, to put it in absolute terms everyone can understand, the generators that power AI can only be cooled down with drinking water. You are wasting so much water, and you are doing incalculable damage to ecosystems and drying up so much water in so many areas wherever places are building these large data harvesting, energy pillaging facilities. Is it really worth having some not that funny meme that's instantly going to be not even viewable in a week's time?
Yeah.
And I think too, the whole argument of, oh, it's here to stay. It doesn't have to be. It's not necessarily. We saw, you know, people, NFTs are here to say this is the new frontier, and that's gone.
You mean to tell me you didn't get any of Troma's NFTs?
All my money is tied up in Beanie Babies right now, so I couldn't anyway. But the point is, it's just, we could still say no. We can choose not to, forgive, like, oh yeah, this Hollywood movie, we used AI to fix this actor's accent. Like, no, get the actor to do it. It's what they're for. We, used AI to put in this dead actor to play this character. Oh, we got the okay from his estate. Like, to otherwise, what if they would have said no, you would have not done it? You're gonna put the onus on them for making a dead man talk in your movie. The little bits of it that creeping in, and that's like I said earlier, there's other movies too that say, oh, we used AI to make an uncanny valley, or we hired an art department to use AI, and you can choose not to do it, and you're gonna get things that ultimately look better. Troma alumni Michael Gawkin, who did the painting for the front of this album, we didn't use any AI for touching up any of it. It looks great, like the painting itself, but the full on, like, real painting. And to have that painting and having the layout artist who did the layout for the album and how great that looks, what would be the AI option? Would it have been cheaper, or since the cheaper automatically make things good in anything? No, I have opinions on AI.
I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about it, because in the history of Troma, they're always talking about the current headlines in the news to bring out their message that might be disguised with toxic creatures and stuff. And that was something I thought was cool about the Troma project, was we have an album celebrating the 50 years of Troma, but also there is a message there for everybody else, keeping in that tradition of 50 years.
Thanks. And I think too, with Troma at its core, every Troma movie was made because some human had something they wanted to make. However your feelings of it, you may love Baconhead, you may hate Escape from Hell, but you'll never forget Centerfold Girls. Someone had the artistic desire to do it, and Troma, say what anyone will about him. People can love Troma, they can hate Troma, they can have a love-hate with Troma, they can hate-love Troma. Troma has always allowed a platform for these visions, these movies to be seen by people. You can read in the forewords people have written for Lloyd's book, where Lloyd says, do you want people to see your movie? These are movies, and even if on some Troma commentaries they jokingly mention the last stop on the train is Troma, it's still a train stop, and then it's going to connect to another train. It's going to get out there. It's a beautiful thing. And I think having that human elements, you have in movies, even the Troma, the more stuff that's obscure now, people are going to find it. It's going to live on. There's Troma movies that Troma distributed in the 80s that may have not become top titles, but now in the era of boutique Blu-ray and streaming services are finding a whole new audience, because people followed visions that were so many years ahead of their time. And even movies that were thought, were liked when they came out, now can be loved and cherished for just how ahead of the time they were. Movies like The Newly Deads, movies like Strangest Dreams, Invasion of the Space Creatures. These movies that had foresight, while on top of just being fun and a face value sort of thing. And AI, if we're referring to it as a quote unquote tool or using a lever, you're not going to get that sort of human passion and element in anything that AI creates.
Here.
A lot of people might be tuning in to this podcast waiting to just hear me be like, so then we took this part of Combat Shock and the hip-hop elements of Unspeakable, and it all comes from Pterodactyl Women from Beverly Hills, and then they're getting my call to arms about, which, this is...
I was really just hoping to have you on so I could hear your AI prompts for your Demented Death Farm Massacre beat.
Right. Yeah. I do want to say, though, another beauty of being able to make a hip hop album with Troma is, I think over the past 50 years, it's gone overlooked, the hip hop milestones that are within Troma. And I don't think it's anyone's fault for that. I think it's just kind of one of those things that maybe the news of that had fallen through the cracks, or it just had been promoted. And Troma primarily, so many genres of music exist in so much of Troma. You have, musicals like Cannibal the Musical and Superstar Led AD. And you also have the very strong punk connection, punk influence all throughout Troma's, all their years from the Smithereens and Class of Nukem I to the heavy work with Go-Kart Records around the Terra Firma era. That it kind of gets overlooked, the hip-hop connections Troma has. Stuck on You from 1982, the first time a post-hip-hop that a character raps in a movie. There's, of course, the people who influenced rapping years later, like, Good Ray Moore raps, or does what he calls Dolomite's rap and Dolomite and that. And you have, like, people do the stuff, Hustlers Convention, where it is the influence of what would be a proto-rap almost. But, post-hip-hop, post the hip-hop being a phenomenon, Troma recognized it first. And yes, they put it in the form of rabbis, but that's still the first instance of rapping on screen. You look at that, you look at probably the most consequential hip-hop single of all time, Grandmaster Flash and Grandmaster Melly Mel's The Message. First movie to ever license it was Story of a Junkie. That's absolutely major. Now that song has been, it's in Happy Feet, it's in DreamWorks films. It's one of those, it's the song that gets played in grade school music classes as an example of what hip-hop is and where it came from. And Troma was right there at the forefront to implement it in there. You have Death by Temptation, first horror movie to have an all hip-hop soundtrack. There is a presence of hip-hop with Troma and around Troma, and there's so many, just growing up in New York, people love Troma, and you have Troma references in songs from like Sage Francis, DJ Reddy C, who's a beloved DJ in New York. I remember I was not aware he was a Troma fan when I was appearing on something, I think a podcast he was doing back in the Wild West podcast days of like 2008. And I remember going into his apartment, and beneath his TV, his entire row of DVDs were all Troma. And because it caught my eye, because I looked at 11, it's like, oh, he's Back Road Diner. That's not a movie allowed. Oh, that's another Troma. There's another Troma. There's another Troma. And then you wound up talking about Troma on air. And it's funny because I remember, so we were talking about, like, I think I was promoting Knee Jerk Reaction at that time. And I think like we had just gone out of playing My Hoodie, my song with Childish Gambino, because Sick Boy had come out recently too. And he says to me, so I hear you like Tromaville, going like right into it. So it's Troma's always going to be a part of my fiber and my orbit. And I'm glad to have sort of done this love letter, to Lloyd, who has always been so encouraging to just the Troma team, the Troma vibes. And I think there's so many parallels that can be drawn within the DIYing, the formation of hip hop, and with the Troma team aesthetic of the coming together to create something new. You look at the influence in the horror comedy side of Troma and you think, oh, that's just, kind of how with sampling, taking a part of a thing here and part of a thing here and making something new with it. You look at Lloyd will wear his references and his influences on his sleeve at times and still use that to create something new and find a space and a lane for it to be put in there. Like, the two motorcycles looking like a truck scene in Toxic 3 when stand in front of it. And part of that can be where so much in like, early hip hop and even like, the first 30 years of hip hop, you have people just doing what their favorite parts about other music and other genres they like and putting that into the hip hop sphere. There just seems to be so much of a kinship that exists, just the kindred souls within the spirit of hip hop and the aroma to Troma, that it just feels right to finally, on a full-on project, merge these worlds.
This show, as well as all of the programming on Loudspeaker, is listener supported. What that means to you is that rather than go to corporate sponsors and advertisers who are trying to sell you crap you don't need, we go straight to you. We go to the audience, and our audience helps us do what we do. The way you do that is by making a tax-deductible contribution to Loudspeaker. Go to loudspeaker.org and click on the support button. You can give one time or every month. It's entirely up to you, and we thank you so much for your support. Every single dollar helps us keep the lights on and tell more interesting stories like the one you're hearing right now. Thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
I think a lot of that with Troma feeling very hip hop and punk to that matter is arguably the birthplace of both of those scenes is New York City, and hip hop right at the same time, punk a decade later. All of these scenes are happening at the same time with kind of the same age group of artists. You know, maybe they all weren't hanging out at the Warhol factory, but they all knew who each other was. You know, whether you would see, you know, Lloyd showing up at a Beastie Boys show, probably not, but there's people at the Beastie Boys show who also were showing up to volunteer at the Troma office. It's just kind of surreal to think about.
Yeah, you know, and in the early days of hip hop, because like they were both this outsider music, you know, you had like the Cold Crush brothers were performing at CBGBs. Like there is the punk rock and hip hop connections in a lot of it. You know, you look at like the early fashion between the two, like pulling from each other. Yeah, it's, I think, just that pool of artists, and it is like you mentioned, it's a good observation that the type of things that could really, in so many ways, only have come from New York, and the working with what we have, maximizing our resources, accentuating our positives, obscuring our negatives, and following our heart to make what we want to make. Like, what's more Troma than that? What's more hip hop than that? What's more punk than that?
The super DIY roots of all of those things, because the mainstream, you know, you're not going to get the glamorous disco recording contract or the big Hollywood film contract. You got to make this shit yourself with what you got. And that could be a stolen bass guitar, or it could be your neighbor's record player, or, you know, your grandma's Bolex camera. And that's how it all kind of, you know, all the stuff that I love has started. So, and I think it's really cool that you're exploring the hip hop side of that, which the punk side of it is definitely been explored upon in Tromaville, but not as much hip hop. So it's really cool that this entry is in there.
Yeah. And, you know, you even look for the progression of, you know, both of those labels, because even when there would be eventually the major label interest and you'd see like some of the larger artists get picked up and distributed, there would still be the indie labels and, you know, there's ones that wound up becoming really beloved because they did take the chance on featuring artists who were following their own heart. And a lot of those would be in the same, as Lloyd puts it, the last stop on the train, which would be Troma. And, you know, those indie labels would be the brand you could trust, just how Troma would be the brand you can trust.
Even still, like you get these artists who they don't forget where they're from. Like you have Raekwon referencing the Toxic Avenger, something that you never would expect to hear in a million years. Like he's singing about being a street mafioso dude, but he's throwing in a Toxic Avenger reference. And that's just like one of the coolest things ever.
Yeah, it just shows just how much these Troma films resonate. And, you know, they really are going to be around forever. It's both, they're so of the time and they're so timeless, which I think the best art always is. At the core of it, there's so much that just stick with it. Like there's people who hate the Toxic Avenger who could still tell you 5 things that happen in the Toxic Avenger. It just speaks to how much it becomes part of your fiber in so many ways.
I think on that, I have one more question about the album, and then I want to ask you just some more Troma-centric stuff. But if you could have anybody guest with you on this album, from the wide world of hip hop, living or dead, who would you want to lay some verses down with, and what topic would you like to hear them cover?
I'd say Scarface. I think Scarface has been just so consistent as just such an amazing storyteller. And I think with so much of Troma being that vivid storytelling, that innovative way to tell stories in so many great Troma films, that hearing a Scarface take on a Troma narrative would be amazing. And I think if I could have any sort of Troma topic, I would probably find some way to get Scarface to rap about one of the Troma scripts that just never got produced as a movie, that we could have like some existence of it, like to hear like, you know, Shocked and Shockability, The Revenge of Jane Austen from the perspective of Scarface in it, I think would be incredible. So that's probably what I would go to for that. The beauty of Troma is so much you don't know like what's going to happen next in a Troma movie at times. And I think it'd be cool to have E40, who is such an innovator of slang and such an innovator of flows, to pop on a track and to hear maybe E40 give the perspective of someone in a Troma film who maybe we only see for like a scene and don't see again. Like, I want to hear E40 rap as one of the truck drivers in the Toxic Avenger who Melvin falls into the open barrel of waste. I want to know what the rest of their day was like, and I want E40 to let us know what that day was like.
So for me, I have a couple that dream pairings is you and Kid and Play for Dead Dudes in the House, but not the movie, but the poster.
Yes.
Like what the movie that the Dead Dudes in the House poster is, I think would be pretty great. And my other one would be you and MF Doom, but just about the Kabuki Man car flip.
We could get a whole lot of mileage out of that.
Well, I mean, just enough until it flips upside down.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, but then we could replay the footage of that. Like,
exactly.
I'm viewing like some like super high concept thing where it's MF Doom saying the same line or the same like 4 bars 4 times, but he has a different emphasis. So it's like it's a whole different thing each time, like how the car flip appears. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things I love talking to you about in general is just Troma movies, and you're somebody I will go to for advice and just general knowledge on Tromaville, which I'm glad that you're also helping produce the show and everything with just blessing us with your knowledge. But do you have any deep cut recommendations for everybody? Right now in October, I'm doing the 31 Days of Tromaween, where I'm throwing some classics, but also some deep cuts. And I know you always have some random deep cut Troma movies that people should see.
The big one I've been telling people all year is The Newly Deads, which I know you already covered a few days back. And it is just so good, so ahead of its time. You did a better job explaining why it's great than I could right now. So highly recommend people checking that one out. I'm a major love of that one. I always think for people who want something really funny, I always tell people, I think Stuck on You is Lloyd's funniest comedy. And the beauty of, because Stuck on You was Lloyd's tribute to Tom Lehrer, who just passed away, and Stan Freberg. And the cool note about that is about a decade ago, I was interviewing Stan Freberg's son, Donovan Freberg. Roger Prince died. I did a piece about the spaghetti commercial Stan Freberg wrote for Prince Spaghetti and how he got Prince to agree to not take legal action against, a Prince in concert with your favorite pasta sauce. And at the end of this conversation with him, I mentioned to Donovan, hey, have you ever heard of a movie called Stuck on You? And he wasn't familiar with it. I mentioned, Lloyd Kaufman of Troma, president of Troma Studios, creator of the Toxic Avenger, basically made a movie as a love letter to your dad's comedy. And Donovan told me how cool he thought that was because he has a memory of him sitting with his dad watching the Toxic Avenger.
That's so cool.
So that's pretty cool to know that when you talk about you make something that, your heroes love, and then knowing that they love something, that you made, there's this. So yeah, Stuck on You, I think is very funny. I think it's another ahead of its curve thing. I think he also the great comedic styles of Professor Irwin Corey. I have a major love of puns. So however much someone loves puns, the mileage on there may vary. Side note, it's kind of weird to look at people who are so critical, like hypercritical of puns, and say that, puns are, quote, like the lowest form of writing or lowest form of comedy. But when you look at some of our all-time great artistic minds like James Joyce and Stanley Kubrick and David Lynch, so much of their deep intertextual dual meanings that make their work so provocative and so heavy and have so much long-lasting replayability is because it's puns, basically. It's not someone like the audience and making a yuck.
Yeah.
But it is that sort of wordplay with language or ideas and the tapestry of linguistics. So I love a good pun.
I like that you mentioned Stuck on You and Lloyd's love of Stan Freberg and Tom Lehrer. Another, growing up with the Dr. Demento show, hearing those guys all the time, like one of my cherished memories will always be talking to Lloyd about Tom Lehrer and then us just singing Poisoning the Pigeons in the Park together. It's just one of those like he's like, you know who Tom Lehrer is? It's like, hell yeah, man. Like he's so cool. Like he's really funny. And like, if it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be Weird Al. And like, I would have never got into any of the stuff that I got into.
And Tom Lehrer, also a big proponent of sampling. Like, I think one of his last big public appearances was the letter he sent giving his approval for 2 Chainz sampling his song, The Old Dope Peddler, which if you haven't read, it's worth looking up. It's very funny. And that stuff's great. And it just, yeah. I'd say also in terms of like the kind of deep, and these like Stranger Things, Invasion of the Space Creatures isn't, I don't think, too deep of a cut, because it is one that I think people are really catching on now. It is one that I hope gets a remaster and release soon, probably it is. And another one that I think does, that I think now the world may be ready again for it, is Dog Years is great. These boutique labels, some of these Troma films that exist in there, they're leaving money on the table, like by these things not just getting out and finding a new audience. And now that we have the technology to make, because a lot of these movies like only exist in VHS tapes recorded in EP from the 90s, and you can only do so much. And there's still, the great movie shines through on them, but you can in so many ways only do so much. Whereas now, not the people who have the resources and the means and the shared love to do this and really do it right. I adore Wizards of the Demon Sword, the Fred Olen Ray medieval epic, and I met Michael Berryman for the first time the other week, and he had so many fond things to say about the making of that. So that's really cool too. And yeah, that was Fred Olen Ray, as was Edgar Allan Poe's Haunting Fear, which Fred Olen Ray directed, and Michael Berryman was also one, which no longer in the Troma catalog, but on the Blu-ray of Haunting Fear that Fred Olen Ray's Retro Media put out, they do have the blooper reel for Wizards of the Demon Sword on it. So it's a cool, for people should just own Haunting Fear anyway in the new Blu-ray, but to have that sort of cross connection as well to it. The beauty of Troma is because also so many Troma films are like bigger in different parts of the world, that something's always a new undiscovered gem, and something is always great to be found. Like, not every Troma movie is gonna click with every Troma fan, but there's a reason we keep, going into this beach with our metal detector, and eventually we do find something really valuable. And what makes these things valuable is these passionate artistic vision projects that just connect with us. And thank goodness that Troma was able to make these things exist out in the world.
Well, I think on that, I want to hear one more song, but first, where can people find you on the socials?
They can follow me blindly on all social media at Chaz Raps. That's at ChazRaps. And I also recommend everyone for information on the album, where to get it. It should be available wherever music can be streamed or stolen. But the limited edition vinyl on the Echo Mix Green is very cool, and you can find that through Four Finger Distro, and they're on all social media and on Bandcamp in particular. I recommend going towards and supporting them and supporting the other artists who are on there. And you can otherwise hear me on NPR and The Currents, and please continue supporting your local public media station. It's important to have. I love people supporting that, and find me in your heart.
You're always in my heart, Chaz. Real quick, everybody, before you stay traumatized, Chaz, tell us about the last song we're going to hear.
This is Radiation April. I think every Troma fan knows about Radiation March, and this is an idea I had for a song we wanted to do new takes on things that all Troma fans know and love. And with the Radiation March being on just about every Troma Team video release, in the love of the Stravinsky composition that it's always used, and also on the album utilizing a lot of Troma themes, I wanted to make sure there was some touch on environmentalism. So all that together, it is the spiritual sequel to Radiation March. This is Radiation April.
Thank you, Chaz, and everybody out there, stay traumatized.
Can you feel it? Can you smell it? Can you taste it? By the time you see it, it's too late. late to face it. Getting harder to maintain my composure in a world full of such radiation exposure. Looking for closure and running for shelter. The ionizing helter-skelter could melt ya. Doesn't have to be atomic bomb massacres. Even air pollution occurs in cardiovasculars. And corporations still claim that it's impossible. Contamination's elevated to anthropological. Ignore the science to rack up another bonus. And pass the buck to private citizens who get the onus. Radiation, April. Radiation, April. Radiation, April. Radiation, April. Pollution level rise, level rise, level rise, level rise, level rise, level rise. Danger, danger. Don't breathe, don't breathe, don't breathe, don't breathe, don't breathe. Telescope, periscope, microscope. You can see the damage caused by the isotopes. Even with new technological advantages, it's still impossible to undo all the damages. Almost a form of widespread manslaughter. Victims from the emissions in the groundwater. While our respiratory systems stay hogtied from sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide. A clear correlation with accumulation should clear the way for bioremediation. The type of microbes that do what men don't. Cause if pollution grows, our children won't. Radiation, April. Radiation, April. Radiation, April. Radiation, April.
Talkin' Troma with Zach Bynes is hosted and produced by Zach Bynes, Chris Lanfear, and Chaz Kangas. Our head of research is Dr. Nolan Stoltz. The show is recorded at Loudspeaker Studios in Fort Collins, Colorado. Executive producers for Loudspeaker are Chris Lanfear and Charles Joseph Kelly. Our theme music is by J57 and Bald Halfwit. Talkin' Troma is a listener-supported production of Loudspeaker Studios, a nonprofit public radio service. To support the show, please consider making a donation at loudspeaker.org. Catch new episodes of the show Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, streaming at loudspeaker.org and the Loudspeaker mobile app. Past episodes of the show can be found at talkintroma.com, and you can find us on social media at Talkin' Troma. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in Tromaville.
This has been a listener-supported production of Loudspeaker Studios. For more on this and other programs, visit loudspeaker.org.